All right, wonderful algebra students. Welcome back. This is Mrs. Nell, and today we're going to be talking about quadratic equations. In the last section, we learned to factor quadratic expressions. Expressions, remember, does not have the equal sign. Well, why did we learn to factor? Well, we learned to factor so that we can find the roots of the equation. Factoring is one way that we can find the solutions to a quadratic equation. Would you do me a favor, please? And please write at the top of your paper, we learned to factor so that we can find the roots of the equation. All right. So now, remember that we saw ax squared plus bx plus c. Ax squared plus bx plus c, we told you, was standard form of a quadratic, and it was an expression. Well, now we're going to add y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. And when we do that, we now have an equation. And because we've added the y, we can now graph that equation. All right? Remember, the a is the coefficient in front of the x squared, the b is the coefficient of x, and c is the constant. All right, so the name of our graph is called a parabola. A parabola is a U-shaped graph, all right, and it can go upwards or it can go downwards. And we're going to start with the downward one because it's my favorite, because I'm from Illinois and the gateway to the west is the St. Louis Arch, and the downward parabola is the St. Louis Arch. So we're going to start with downward parabola. Well, what do we know about a downward parabola? Well, notice where the arrows are. The arrows are pointing down. Also notice it's kind of, again, like the St. Louis Arch. So you go to the very, very top of the arch, and that's as high as you can go. So that high point is called the vertex, and the vertex is the highest value of y. We also call that a maximum. I cannot go any higher than the top of the parabola or the top of the arch. Once I go up to the top, there's nowhere else to go but down. All right, an upward parabola, this is the equation for a downward parabola. I want you to look at this equation. What do you notice different about this equation than the one I just showed you? If you said the negative sign, you are right. A downward parabola has a negative a value. So if a is negative, it's going to be a downward parabola. So you can tell immediately if it's an upward parabola or a downward parabola, if it's going to have a maximum or if it's going to have a minimum. And again, downward has a maximum. There's nowhere else I can go. So upward parabola looks like a U. All right? So again, it has a point at the bottom that we call the vertex. This time, the vertex is at the lowest point it can be. All right? I can't go down any further. And so the lowest point we call a minimum. So an upper parabola has a minimum. A downward parabola has a maximum. And what do you think that the A is going to be? Is it going to be positive or negative? You're right. The A is going to be positive. So there's no negative sign. And if it's a positive A value, it's going to be an upward parabola. If it's a negative A value, it's going to be a downward parabola. All right. So notice here I have two parabolas, and they're pretty skinny ones, but that's okay. And some of them are wider, some of them are really narrow, like these two. And we have something called the axis symmetry. Well, I want you to think, what did you learn the word symmetry meant, or what is a symmetrical object? Well, symmetry means that I can fold something onto itself, like a heart. We just celebrated Valentine's Day, and a heart folds on top of itself. That's how I learned to cut out hearts. All right, so that fold line was my axis of symmetry. Well, parabolas are symmetrical. They are equal distance from this axis of symmetry. So notice that when I draw the axis of symmetry, I use a dashed line or a dotted line. You are going to show me your axis of symmetry every single time when you graph parabolas. The axis of symmetry is the x value. All right. This equation is how I would find the axis of symmetry. X equals the opposite of b over 2a. So notice how I didn't say negative b. I said the opposite of b over 2a, because sometimes if my b is already negative, some kids think, oh, then it just stays the same. No, 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 no. It's the opposite of b over 2a. The vertex is written as an ordered pair, x and y. So once I find the axis of symmetry, I know the x value. And what I need to do is I need to plug in that x value, whatever I find, into my original equation to find the value of y. That's what we're going to do right now. We're going to practice that. So let's look at this problem. We are going to find the axis of symmetry of this equation. Y equals x squared plus 8x plus 15. Every time I want you to write down what the axis of symmetry equation is. If you put it on the top of your paper, and every time you turn your paper over, rewrite it again. All right? And so we know we have x equal the opposite of b over 2a. So what do I need to know? Well, I need to know the value of b and the value of a. What does a equal? What does b equal? A equals 1 and b equals 8. All right? I don't need to know c right now. I will later, but I don't need to know it right now. I just need to know a and b. So now I'm going to plug in my a and my b into the axis of symmetry equation. So the opposite of 8 over 2 times 1, and that's going to give me negative 8 over 2, which then reduces to negative 4. So my axis of symmetry is at negative 4. That means that my x value is negative 4. All right? Now notice how I wrote that down in ordered pair form, but I don't have my y. So now what do I have to do? Well, I have to plug in negative 4 into my equation to find y. All right? So this is the tricky part. So negative 4 is my total value, and I'm going to have here negative 4. That whole quantity is squared. Now you're going to see something in the next problem that's a little different. So I have here a negative 4 squared plus 8 times negative 4 plus 15. Well, negative 4 times negative 4 is 16. 8 times negative 4 is negative 32, and then plus 15. All right, and then when I add my 15 and 16 together, I know that that's going to be 31, and then I have a negative 32, so my answer is going to be negative 1. So my y value is going to be negative 1. All right, so what is that parabola going to look like? Well, first of all, I know that I have to draw a graph, okay? So go ahead and draw a graph, sketch a graph, and my vertex is at negative 4, negative 1. That means I'm going to go to the left 4 and down 1. Guess it. It doesn't have to be perfect right now. All right. I know that my axis of symmetry is going to be right through that vertex. Now here's the tricky part. Is it an upward parabola or is it a downward parabola? Well, A is positive. Since A is positive, it's going to be an upward parabola. So now I'm just going to sketch a U-looking graph just like that. All right, let's do another one. Y equals negative x squared plus 10x minus 23. What do I want you to write down every time? I'm going to be looking for that, all right? So A equal B equal. This time A is negative 1 and B is 10. So the opposite of 10 over 2 times negative 1. Well, negative 10 divided by negative 2 is positive 5. All right, so my x value is positive 5. Okay, this is where the tricky part comes in. Notice that I have a negative on the outside, but I have a positive 5. That negative just stays there. It's meaning the opposite of 5 squared. The opposite of 5 squared. Well, 5 squared is 25, okay? But the opposite of 5 squared is going to be negative 25. And then 10 times 5 minus 23. And I'm going to get positive 2. So y is equal to positive 2. All right. So now let's graph it. We're going to put our point at 5, 2. We're going to draw our axis of symmetry. All right. Now we're going to say, okay, is it an upward parabola or a downward parabola? Well, A was negative, so guess what? It's a downward parabola. And there's my sketch of that equation of a quadratic. Let's do one last problem. All right. Y equals 3x squared minus 12x plus 5. All right. I want you to pause the video, please. Okay? And go ahead and see if you can walk through the steps. And then when you're ready, restart the video. Welcome back. All right. Did you write down your equation? You're supposed to. A equal B equal. The opposite of negative 12 over 3 times 2 is going to be equal to positive 2. Plug in positive 2 for x. And we're going to get here 3 times 2 times quantity squared, so 2 squared times 3 minus 12 times 2 plus 5. 3 times 4 is 12 minus 24 plus 5 is negative 7. All right. I hope you got it right. If you didn't, take a moment to erase, change your mistakes, and we'll see you tomorrow.